If Metal Gear Solid 1 is something along the lines of a game creator declaring that he felt he'd done all he needed to do with the series, and Metal Gear Solid 2 is a game creator declaring that he'd rather leave the series in the memories of the audience than start muddying up people's individual interpretations and meanings with a canon, then Metal Gear Solid 3 is a warning that, if this keeps up, things are going to get stale.
それが隠密部隊コップスの特殊任務ホワイトハウスにある人物から連絡がクルシチョフからジョンソン
Gene, meme, scene. As far as I can tell, this idea was first introduced in the E3 2004 trailer for Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Those first two immediately make sense if you've watched the previous sections of this video. MGS1 is about genes, MGS2 is about memes, but MGS3 is about scenes? What does that mean? Well, let's get into it. So, having just replayed MGS3 for this video, I noticed that it feels like it's a lot less about its themes than the previous two games. I mean, MGS1 was all about genes. It had a genetic clone pitted against his twin, fighting a cast of characters who all basically have parental trauma, and the Genome Army. Metal Gear Solid 2 is about memes and the manipulation of ideas, and the entire point of basically everything in that game is to mess with your own perception of reality and try to control how you think. MGS3 says it's about scenes, and it is, I'll get into that in a bit, but I find it's more about Naked Snake learning to balance his humanity with his loyalty as a soldier, only to realize that humanity isn't really compatible with what the world needs from him now. Every other game in the series ends with our player character looking forward to their new life. This is the only one that ends with Snake being utterly hopeless, and that's very important for reasons that we'll get into in a little bit. So, MGS3 is the first game in the series that feels like it's really about the characters above anything else. With that in mind, let's quickly recap the story, since all of the plot twists in the last half can make things pretty confusing when you look back at it all. Basically, during World War II, the Soviet Union, America, and China formed together to create a branch called the Philosophers, pretty much the Illuminati, the Patriots before the Patriots, and they pulled together a huge sum of money to rebuild the world after World War II. This money is hidden all over the world, and the key to finding it was information on a microchip called the Philosopher's Legacy. Volgin, one of the parties vying for control of Russia, managed to manipulate a few political situations so that he would inherit the legacy, and he used his money to begin development on the first Metal Gear prototypes. The boss, Naked Snake's mentor, after her Cobra unit was disbanded, was put on a mission by America to fake her defection and join up with Volgin in order to locate the Philosopher's Legacy and return it to America. To help her in this mission was Ocelot, an NSA codebreaker who acted as a triple agent, making everybody think he'd betrayed America to work for Russia, but actually being a spy for the CIA. When the boss fakes her defection to Volgin's forces, she gives him a Davy Crockett portable nuke launcher, and Volgin fires it at the now antiquated design bureau that was working on a failed Metal Gear prototype, in order to blame America, since Snake was seen on a mission to rescue a scientist, Sokolov at the time. The nuke going off immediately made Khrushchev suspect America of breaking the conventions of war, and so the boss's mission to locate the Philosopher's Legacy was revised. She would now have to locate the legacy and deliver it to America with the help of Ocelot, and let herself be killed by Snake, in order to prove that she had indeed defected, to sell Russia on the lie. Snake is supposed to meet up with Adam, aka Ocelot, only his meeting is interrupted by a woman calling herself Eva, the other codebreaker who had supposedly defected. Eva is actually a spy, trained by the Chinese branch of the Philosophers, and ordered to collect the legacy for China. She fools everyone into thinking that she works for America, and ultimately manages to steal a fake Philosopher's Legacy, as the real one is actually in Ocelot's hands, along with the development plans for the first Metal Gear. That would be the TX-55 Metal Gear that Solid Snake would go on to destroy in Metal Gear 1 for the MSX. America begins development on Metal Gears, and using the Philosopher's Legacy, they create the Patriots, the same shadow organization that acted as the Illuminati in MGS2 and tried to control information. So, to put it all as simply as possible, Snake has to kill Volgin and the boss in order to stop the Cold War from turning hot, and through a series of crazy spy antics, America is poised to create the Patriots, while Russia and China are left to pick up the scraps. Okay. Told you it was complicated, and I barely even touched on Sokolov or Granin, but whatever, that's plenty for now. let's talk about the times so that we can start chipping away at the deeper meaning behind this insane spy story.
The times. The times. The times. The times. The times.
So, throughout a lot of the game, anytime that someone who was involved with the philosophers is talking, they're talking about something called the times. They're talking about how politics determine who you have to face on the battlefield, and how a change of just a few years is enough to turn friends into enemies. Ultimately, in the boss's eye, accepting this truth is the key to world peace. Once you accept that war is nothing but an arena for politicians, the very concept of a nation becomes almost meaningless. This is a philosophy that makes a whole lot of sense for the boss. After her Cobra unit was disbanded, she was forced to kill her lover and comrade, the Sorrow, all because of a shift in the times, which turned allies into enemies. Now Snake is in the exact same situation, forced to kill the person who, in his own words, owns half of his soul. Somebody who he lived and died with for 10 years. And Snake has to choose whether he'll be loyal to the times or loyal to what he believes in. Snake puts the mission above all else, ditching his own humanity in the process and killing someone that he loves. This attitude of Snake's, caring little for his own humanity and focusing instead on devoting himself entirely to the mission, makes him weird. He's surrounded by interesting characters who are all quippy and unique and memorable, but Snake himself is cold. While, yes, it's kind of a silly scene, Eva's introduction to Snake is a perfect example of how empty Snake is. She tries to seduce him normally, and he barely responds at all, so she has to seduce him with a gun, and information critical to his mission to start earning his trust. Before moving forward, I think we need to touch on one very important line. When the boss is staging her defection to Volgan, she says that Snake is still too pure, and that he hasn't yet found an emotion to carry into battle. The Cobra unit is composed of the Fury, the Pain, the Sorrow, the End, and the Joy, boss. Each one of them has a philosophy and an emotion that drives their humanity in spite of their dedication to their missions. Snake, however, is just Snake. He isn't a person, he's a gun, a tool for his government, nothing but a meaningless vessel for both politicians and the player. This is, in my eye, what MGS3 is the most about. Snake learning to carry an emotion into battle so that he can become more than just a gun. As the game progresses, Snake's emptiness shows more and more. He isn't as soulless as, say, Raiden at the beginning of MGS2. He still jokes a little bit, and he has some quips here and there, but you get the impression that this man just doesn't feel. Like all of his joking with Paramedic is just a mask he wears. He doesn't even react to Eva's advances whatsoever for most of the game. He just grits his teeth during the torture scenes. He goes forward on his mission knowing full well that it's going to end with him killing his best friend and lover. This all fits really well with the cold, systems-based gameplay of the Metal Gear series. Once you understand the systems well enough, there's zero ambiguity. You climb trees the exact same way every time. Guards react to sounds the exact same way every time. Snake responds to your controller inputs the exact same way every time, whether his leg is broken or he's starving to death. Snake, and indeed every Metal Gear protagonist, feels like a robot in a way that's just hard to put your finger on. There's just something so mechanical about the way that these characters control, and that's critical to the amazing feeling of the gameplay, but it's something that the games like to play with some. Here in MGS3, that mechanical nature of Snake's extends to the survival systems too. Hunger is nothing but a gauge, with very concrete, definable consequences to neglecting it. Injuries are healed cold and sterilely in some menu, and more experienced players will even opt to not heal their injuries at all, as letting them heal naturally gives you a bigger health meter. You can just spin Snake around in the survival viewer to make him vomit up poisons. Both within and without Snake, MGS3 feels like the most mechanically driven game in the entire series. There are just loads and loads of mechanics here, each one operating without any ambiguity. But back to Snake, he feels like the most mechanical Snake we've ever gotten to control, and that fits perfectly with this idea that he's willing to put the mission above his own humanity. It doesn't matter what he feels, all that matters is what buttons you press. However, Snake does have a character arc in this game. He doesn't stay this heartless killing machine from beginning to end. He finds an emotion to carry into battle just in time to take on the boss. I can't say exactly what that sensation is. You could say it's love or pain or dedication or courage. Hell, it could even be fear or rage. It kinda depends on how you play, honestly. Regardless of what emotion he finds for himself, Snake feels way more like a human by the end of this game than he does in the beginning. he's loosening up a bit. He's starting to allow himself to have fun and connect with people. It's actually a little bit beautiful watching him slowly let Eva into his heart, even as he knows that she's an agent on a mission of her own. However, Snake still has to complete his mission. In the final hour of this game, Snake learns from the boss that she really is still working with America, and that her sacrifice was essentially nothing but a way for America to get its hands on the philosopher's legacy. He and the boss gave everything just to get some money for a few people who saw them as disposable all along. He learns that the philosophers intentionally caused these shifts in the times that turn people like the boss into enemies, partly as a way to fuel the military-industrial complex, but also as a way of maintaining an unstable political situation in the world so that it's easier for them to maintain power. However, the philosophers themselves fell victim to these changes in the times, and were split apart, like Snake and the boss. Snake, at the end of MGS3, figures out how to balance being human with being a soldier, just in time to learn that this new generation he's moving into doesn't want him to be human. They just want him to be a gun. Mind you, we already know by the end of the game what this is all leading to. The world of Metal Gear Solid 2, where thoughts are being manipulated, war is controlled, and where passion and individuality are left to die. This world doesn't want the sorrow, the pain, the joy, the fury, or the fear. The world doesn't need Jack, the soldier who learned empathy. The world wants a soldier who can be soulless, a puppet for politicians and for the player. The world doesn't want Jack, it wants Snake. Now, with a normal LEDhead analysis, this would basically be the end of it. I've analyzed what happens in the game and what it means to me, but again, you can't spell Metal Gear without meta. MGS2 was all meta all the time, but the meta-narrative that I see in MGS3 is something that lays beneath all of this other stuff. See, this is a really dense game, richly packed with interesting character arcs, emotional moments, excitement, and intrigue. But beneath all of that stuff is something like a cry for help from Kojima, and the Metal Gear series as a whole. Again, I don't want to put words in Kojima's mouth, but this is all that I see when I think about this game. So let's go back and take a broader look at what Metal Gear Solid 3 really is. The way that Konami probably saw it when it was pitched. It's more Metal Gear, but this time it's set in the 60s and it takes place in the jungle. Still though, it's more Metal Gear. Double and triple agents betraying each other, mechanically deep stealth action, boss fights with wacky characters, a guy called Snake killing someone that he owes part of his soul to, a scheme to spark a world war that turns out to actually all be a ploy by the Illuminati, a radio team providing support, each with their own specialty, a constant journey north with a bit of backtracking here and there to get keys that can open new paths, a climactic final act that flips the stealth core on its head to deliver something more bombastic. Every game that I've talked about so far in this series feels like it could just be an alternate universe sequel to Metal Gear 1, and that, in my mind, is why the theme word for this game is obscene. It doesn't matter where or when you set a Metal Gear game, it's always going to be a Metal Gear game, with a pretty similar plot. Guys named Snake are always going to kill people that they're close to, because that's what the world wants from Metal Gear, and that's what America wants from guys named Snake. From now until the end of this video, every time that you hear me say Snake, I'm referring to the concept of Snake, specifically the ones we control. That means Naked Snake, Raiden, and Solid Snake. We'll get to Venom Snake when the time comes. In the actual timeline of Metal Gear, the things that Naked Snake does in this game lead to the things that happen to Solid Snake and Raiden and MGS2. But in the thematic arc of the series, this game comes last. The abstract concept of Snake originally learned to love his life, then he learned to live his life without fear, then he learned to pass his message on. Now, it's time for him to learn something else. Ironically, the most bombastic, action-packed game in the series so far, to me, is really just trying to say, hey, if things keep going like this, it's going to get really stale. Snake learns that his future is going to be one where he never gets to just ride off into the sunset and have his peace. No matter what we do, Snake will only ever exist if he's on a mission to kill someone he's got major history with. Because that's what happens in Metal Gear, and Snake can't exist without Metal Gear. It's a weird concept, I know, but if you ask me, that's what the handshake at the end of Metal Gear Solid 3 is all about. It's Snake acknowledging that he'll only ever exist as a weapon. It's him accepting that his story won't ever have a happy ending. It's him learning that his role as a protagonist isn't to finally become whole as a person and leave the series behind, but to just keep on doing the same thing he was doing in the other games forever. This is where the fatalism that comes with being a prequel comes into play. The informed Metal Gear player knows from the very beginning that Naked Snake is going to turn into the villain of the series, Big Boss, by the end. We know that whatever Naked Snake goes through in this game, some other guy named Snake is going to be doing something very similar 50 years later, and that society's already doomed in a way. We know from the very beginning that all of this talk about finding yourself and learning to share your humanity with your role as a soldier is just going to lead to the cold, sterile mercenary nations of Metal Gear 1 and 2, and the outright death of free will that we learn about in MGS2. Metal Gear will always be Metal Gear, and Snake in MGS3 finally learns to accept that. So hopefully you get what I'm saying so far. MGS3 is about Snake, this abstract concept that we've been controlling for 5 games now, learning that no matter what happens, as long as there's another Metal Gear, he won't ever get a happy ending. The game creates this idea by drawing a ton of parallels between itself and the previous Metal Gear games, particularly those first two, the 2D ones on the MSX. Snake starts with an impassable barrier to the south and moves north through ever more heavily guarded jungle and urban environments. He fights bosses with incredibly simple core concepts. Those bosses explode for practically no reason when they die. He fights an enemy who's known for his aim that guards a prison area. He gets a transmitter planted on him after escaping a prison. He has a fist fight with an electricity-themed enemy in a square room before taking on a Metal Gear and rushing to the end of the game in a chase scene where he departs via aircraft and kills somebody who he was super close to. I could go on and on and on. While MGS1 had a ton of callbacks to the original 2D games, MGS3's references to the originals are a lot more literal. It uses almost all of the same ideas and concepts of the original games, but jazzed up with more modern technology, writing, and direction. Thematically, this works on 2 levels. Firstly, it better ties the games to Metal Gear 1 and 2, the games that come immediately after this one in the timeline at launch, and are all about Big Boss, the character that Naked Snake was doomed to turn into. That's why Metal Gear 1 and 2 are playable in most versions of Snake Eater through the main menu. So basically, everything from the mechanical, inhuman precision with which Snake and his enemies move, to the boss's simpler motivations and characters, to the general structure of the game and its sequence of events, all exist to drive home this idea that Snake exists solely as a video game character, as somebody who doesn't ever exist unless his god, Hideo Kojima, needs him to go on a heartbreaking mission of loss and emotional ruin, and any personal fulfillment, lessons learned, introspection, or greater understanding of life he attains by the end of a given game won't be enough to save him from being put in some other game some other day. Basically, if a game as outstandingly weird as Metal Gear Solid 2 winds up having so many plot similarities to the rest of the series, then at this point, we all pretty much know exactly what we're getting into when we pick up a brand new Metal Gear game. Snake knows exactly what he's getting into when Kojima allows him to exist again. For most series, this isn't too big of a problem. Master Chief fights aliens and that's all. But for Kojima, a creator who didn't even plan on making Metal Gear 2, much less a Metal Gear Solid 2, it's stale. I can only imagine that by this point in the series, Kojima pretty desperately wanted to move on to a different game, with a different universe and a different tone, different themes and ideas, but he simply wasn't allowed to. The Patriots, Konami, said, "We need to break Snake's heart again. We need to deconstruct his masculinity again and make him question everything he knows one more time." This is what Eva and the boss mean when they talk about the times. It's why Kojima's theme word for MGS3 was scene. Because at the end of this game, Snake learns that regardless of the scene, time and place of the game he's in, he's doomed to do the same stuff over and over forever, because the times demand it. Without Konami and without Kojima, there are no times. So long as Snake exists, the times are going to make him go on another classic, some might say played out, Metal Gear adventure again. So, to sum up where MGS3 sits on that long arc that I keep ending these videos with, MGS3 is, to me, saying, pretty please let me be the end of the series. We've gone full circle all the way to the jungle in the 60s, but the times still control Snake. Just like they've controlled every iteration of Snake. And now there's nowhere for us to go but back around the circle again.
Just look at that bandana. If you can't put the past behind you, you won't survive long.
There's a dozen reasons why this game is called Snake Eater. My favorite among them is that a classic example of a snake eater is an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. Like in Ouroboros, Metal Gear has become a series that just consumes snakes, chews them up and tosses them out. And this is the game where Snake truly loses any hope for a happy ending. Enter Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. I'll be back around soon enough to talk about the last chance that Snake ever had to simply put down the gun and have a happy and fulfilling ending to his story. Before I close out today's video and get to figuring out how the hell I'm going to film PS3 footage for the MGS4 video, I'd just like to first off apologize for how long it took for this video to come out. The MGS2 video took a while because that was an absolutely massive video. This one's only like 20 minutes though, so it really shouldn't have taken this long, but I cut my hair and that made like half my footage unusable. You might have noticed I tried to hide my face a little bit more during the second half because the haircut just... I hated it. And then after that, before I got to shoot more footage, I got very, very sick and was completely out of commission for about a week. And then just some really tragic stuff happened that I'm not going to talk about on the channel right now. And that held me back for about another week. But here I am, it's done. I can focus on the MGS4 video, and then the MGSV video, and then I can be done with this whole thing and move on. Got a big list of ideas that I've planned in my head while I've been working on this whole series. But also, as always, I'd just like to go ahead and verbally thank the patrons, especially those who donate $10 or more monthly, such as The Narcissist Cookbook, Ash Jabatoon, Spooky Ina, Guybrush, Dyer Ellisper, Ellie B, M. Coy, Ayla Scott, Cappy, Lake, Mina, Batty Matty, Random Sageless, Super, Eva Knight, Panda, Mr. Kokoko, Shay Theus, Swatchbox, Nomad Delilah Jester, Bjorb, Lily Leons, Neris, Sean Hamilton, Monkey Monk's Monkey Monastery, Voiced Mute, Haunted Mystic, Charlotte, Freedom Rider, Rio, Laura M, Poof Donut, Femboy Fishing, Atheist, Joannis, IW, Arda Aurelia, Vega Nelson, Demise, Mia Maple, Nicole, Ada Avery, Neurofilter, The Coom Slayer, Summer Celine, Garden at Midnight, Big Time Jim, Darius Fazier, Dinesh Valshakamer, Almost Dead Again, Gab, David Kaiser, Erica, and CeeLo. Once again, I'd just like to apologize for how long the delay has been. I've recently switched to a full-on 9-to-5 schedule with this thing, so I'm working on it for pretty much most hours every single day, and it's been really good for my productivity so far, so hopefully I can keep that up, and the flow of ideas will eventually learn to match that work pace, but we'll see. Anyways, I'll see you all soon with the MGS4 video. Hopefully it won't take too terribly long. We'll see. And have a fantastic week. Thank you, everybody.